Hello, parents, grandparents, future parents, and curious minds. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Steven.
And I'm PJ.
And hi, I'm Shannon.
And this is
Dad's Discuss.
Dad's
Well,
Discuss.
I messed that one up, but all right.
Well, you'll just have to. We'll figure out the Dad's Discuss part in post-op.
Just letting all of our listeners know it's a new experience we're having as we have a guest on who we will introduce shortly. But there is a feedback between me hearing Steven in person and hearing him through my headset, so it's hard for me to gauge when I need to start speaking.
Oh, that's fair. I don't get that, so I have to leave a headset piece off so that I can hear you. We'll figure it out.
Everything he says happens twice, and there's a delay.
Yeah, like PJ said, we've got a special guest here, our first of the series ever. This is Shannon. She is my cousin who lives up in Michigan. Why don't you introduce yourself, Shannon?
Hey, everybody. Yeah, I'm Shannon, Steven's cousin. I do live in Michigan. I live on the west side of Michigan, by Lake Michigan, which is a major attraction. You should all check it out. And yeah, I'm happy to be here. Happy to be a part of the podcast.
Thank you. I really appreciate this. And you are our first official guest on the podcast, so
Cheers to that.
that's right.
Excited about it.
First of all, I'd like to delve into your backstory a little bit. You know, I know most of it, but listeners don't. So, like, this is parenting podcast, and up front, everybody knows or will know you're a pediatrician, so that's extremely relevant to what we talk about. In our last episode was just on medical things that we recorded, so this lines up perfectly. It's fresh on our minds. So if you don't mind, go ahead and dive into, like, you know, your career field and how your kids and how that affects, you know, time with them.
Cool, yeah. So I am a pediatrician, so I guess just simply what that means is I went to medical school after undergrad, so that's a 4-year program. Those 4 years, and then after medical school you kind of decide which field you're most interested in, which obviously for me was kids and pediatrics. So that's the point in your training, which you choose a residency. Residency is where you really focus on whatever your field of choice is, and you get matched through this sort of like intense process to a specific location. And that's where I did my residency in Detroit at Children's Hospital of Michigan. So that's a 3-year training program. You kind of do it all in terms of everything pediatric. So that means inpatient work where kids are hospitalized, ICU work, intensive care, emergency room, outpatient, so that you really kind of understand everything, or, you know, a little bit of everything that is pediatrics. And from there, you kind of have a choice. The choice is keep training. It's a tough one. I mean, man, you're at best, I guess, graduating residency. I don't know. I'm trying to remember how old I was, maybe 27. And then deciding to go on and do another, 2 to 3 years minimum of another training program. So that would mean if you want to be like a pulmonologist, lung doctor for kids, or a heart doctor, you do more training. This is a point in my life where I had been married for a couple years. We were hoping to start a family. So we did. We had my son Eli, who's now 4. And that was a major part of my choice to decide. I think I really am happy with general pediatrics, which is, for me, outpatient work, which means I go to a clinic every day. It's kind of the stereotypical pediatrician that you think of, in the clinic where you go and do your checkups. If your kid's sick, you bring them there. I also do a little bit of work in the hospital, so just newborns who are born, generally healthy newborns. So not like NICU babies. We go and we take care of the babies in the hospital before they're ready to come home, and go home with their families and come in for their checkups in the clinic. So that's a little bit about what I do and how I got there. I practice in Grand Rapids, Michigan now at a private practice called ABC Pediatrics. And I love it. I've been here a couple years now. I think 2022 we moved to Grand Rapids. I've been in this practice for 3 years. Yeah, and we love it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Thank you for that breakdown.
Great,
And I know our listeners appreciate getting that background too before they get into hearing all of our discussions we're about to have.
Yeah, the first part of that where everybody does the same medical school blew me away because I was first exposed to that by Catherine's brother.
Mm-hmm.
He was like flip-flopping for the last 2 years of that, where he was like neurosurgeon, ER, or OB, and it was just like a rotation of those three the whole time.
Spectrum.
Yeah. Were you solid on pediatrician throughout that whole thing, or did you like
Yeah.
flip-flop too?
That's a great question. I think everybody, for the most part, flip-flops at some point. I'm impressed by those who don't. I mean, you go into medical school very interested in the human body and all the parts of it, so to be very, sure beforehand, it would be impressive. I mean, some people do it, but I think it's the exception. I actually went to medical school sort of thinking I wanted to be a dermatologist, a skin doctor. For just some like personal reasons I've had with skin issues and like accessing the healthcare system as a patient. I thought, oh, that would be great. But then I got into medical school, and although I loved a lot of different elements of medicine, I really found that what made me want to keep doing it was like the relational, like longevity with specific patients. And I mean, especially, of course, I'm biased, but kids, you get to see them from this little itty bitty newborn to like an 18-year-old going off, doing things in the world. And I just think that's a really unique, amazing relationship to have. But then also, it's interesting. I mean, I can nerd out about it. Like, the medicine of a baby is not the same medicine of a teenager. And so you're kind of also challenged in that way as they grow up. And you just have such trust from the families and great relationships there that I was drawn into all of that. I found no knock to the dermatologist, but it was kind of like, what's your skin problem? Let me fix it. And potentially that might be the end of your relationship in some cases, which is needed, but I really was driven to the ongoing relationship with a family.
That's funny. Stephen and me had talked about that in one of our medical episodes because he does have a family practitioner that they go to regularly. Mm-hmm. I myself do not. But I agree that building that rapport is something that he kind of made me see and has made me consider, starting to go in for regular checkups.
Heck yeah.
That's good. Take care of yourself.
Maybe he can go to a pediatrician to start out strong.
I don't like to see people older than 18, so.
I'm glad you brought that up because one of the main questions that I would like to speak to you about is in relation to that. Mm-hmm. So here in America, we consider, children to be, quote, adults when they turn 18. But that number to me has been arbitrary. You mm-hmm. can vote, you can't drink, there's all kinds of things about it. But as a medical professional, what do you think is like an appropriate age to consider someone not as a child or as an adolescent and for when they should actually be going to like a family practitioner or doctor? Is it actually 18 or would you say it's a different age?
I think that's a great question. I think it varies really on the person and on the child because, our fear as pediatricians, as kids are getting to that age, is like you're mentioning, this might be the last time they routinely go and see a doctor. They might say, oh, I'm healthy, I'm 18, or all the way to, 35 until I need to see a doctor again. So part of our push doing it kind of right around 18 when you're still in the house with your parents is like, hey, really get that 19-year-old visit, checkup, exam with your internal medicine doctor or family medicine doctor that you can follow with. If you want to go in and get referrals to certain things or you just have issues, you have someone you can go to. So we try to encourage around 18, but I think where it varies is sometimes kids have some more complex medical conditions where we know them so well for 18 years and we're going to hang on to them a little bit more and try to help them transition to an adult provider who will understand. Not that it's something they couldn't understand, but it's just harder to let go of a relationship where we're kind of a little bit more of a advocate for something they've been through medically. But our practice, where we're at, is typically we're encouraging it at 18. I just think it's a good time to really encourage the child, now adult, to kind of take ownership over their health.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like medically in terms of like how the body goes through the puberty process and everything like that, is 18, a pretty reasonable number to say?
Yeah, I think so. I think we've seen them through a lot of those transitions by then. A lot of those kids are hopefully graduating or, going on to trade school or college or, kind of their more quote unquote adult life. I agree with you, like when we should consider an individual an adult probably varies, on maturity and, what their prepared for. But yeah, I think it's a great time to, they've kind of been through a lot of the major big development stages that we as a pediatrician really want to see them through, you know, puberty being a major one of the last ones. So I think, yeah, it's a great time to spread your wings, find a new provider.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. Do you end up recommending like different family medicine doctors for different people, or do you like end up your practice partners with another one or something like that?
And not so much right now, but it would be a cool concept. I mean, I've been here in Grand Rapids for just 3 years now, so kind of getting my feet wet in the community, I feel like. But yeah, that would be a cool thing to pursue, I think.
Yeah, because it would be neat if you had like a rundown of like all the family medicine doctors and what they're really good at that you can hand off like different cases to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be cool.
But yeah, 3 years would be hard to establish that.
Mm-hmm.
Anna Chelly's trying to break in. Anna Chelly, you want to come say hi to cousin
Aww.
Shannon? 1 second. One thing I wanted to bring up, since we had a medical professional as our first guest, was just a topic kind of close to home from our third birth in the form of medical advocacy. Because when we were going through that birth, it was like such a hard judgment call between us and the doctors on, you know, like whether or not to have Catherine be induced to get the baby out as soon as possible. And it was like, it really brought to our eyes, if we didn't have her mom there who was a nurse and her brother who was a doctor, and those feedbacks, if we would have known how to like argue our case with the doctor while we were in there. So I wanted to bring it up in this talk, like, is that like something we need to like, I don't know, pursue as a society, or like, that's a deeper question than maybe we can talk about, but like you as a doctor, like you can advocate for your family, right? And stuff.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting question because it's tricky. Like, you know, being a doctor, your job is to understand medicine, understand evidence, and ultimately be a guide of some kind, right? It's like, you know, I think medicine as a whole, hopefully most people's experience with it has been less paternalistic, this is the way it should be, medicine of the past a little bit, and more, you know, here are the recommendations, here are some like professional opinions, but you know, where there should be some choice, it's left there for a family. But I think that also is difficult for a family who maybe doesn't have, like you're saying, a medical professional in the family who understands their like personal values and, you know, that aspect of like them as an individual. So yeah, that's tricky. You know, I think for me it's always, you know, here's what I think, here are the ways I see we could proceed for your child in this situation. You know, and I try to where there's reason, you know, give options for treatment. You know, I mean, this is not as, I feel like, big of a deal as what you're bringing up, like Catherine's induction, but, you know, ear infection. Okay, I've diagnosed it, we see it's there. Options are let it run its course, see if the child gets better, start antibiotics right away. You know, there's sort of some nuance to it. Because what's difficult as the doctor is people are different, right? So somebody just want the antibiotic right now, I need it, even if I'm telling you, well, it may or may not help right away, we can't, you know. Some people are like, no, I want to let the body do its thing. I want to, you know, see how it plays out, or, you know, give the child a little bit of a chance to not have, say, side effects from that medication. So it's kind of our job, I would say, in summary, is just kind of present the options and try to make a joint decision with a family on how to proceed. But yeah, there could be times where you maybe feel like you and your doctor are on different sides of, you know, something, like they really think you should do something and you disagree. And maybe, is that maybe more how you felt with the induction example?
Well, yeah, it was partially that, but mostly like we as two engineers were never medically really trained beyond like first aid and CPR.
Right.
So it was like we're in this environment where, you know, we're talking blood counts and blood pressure and all sorts of ranges of different fluids or whatever, and we're like completely lost and totally reliant on a doctor that, you know, it may be on call in the evening rather than her normal doctor who knows her well, so we don't know what questions to ask or how to make a judgment call or advocate for ourselves. So
Sure.
one thing we talked about was like, do we think it'd be, or would you recommend, like, what training would you recommend parents to, like, you know, be more knowledgeable, but not like fully a doctor when they go into like care for their young ones and themselves for the future, like classes at a community college or something like that? Or is it like, should you be good enough if you know CPR and first aid?
See, I'm glad you brought that up because I feel that the doctor, Shannon, other medical professionals have been through that training. They have gone to school for this education, and I don't want to get in the way of that. So I would prefer to be a lot more hands off. You know, I want you, here's the issues, please tell me what you think, but I don't want to gain more information on that subject because I don't want to muddy the waters.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think those are good points, and an example right there between the two of you of how people are different and what they want from their doctor is different, which is totally fair. People have different personalities and needs, and so that's where I feel like the doctor's role really should be, and I try to view myself as an educator. You know, I am educated, so I can help a family walk through something, but then it's also my role to help them understand the situation and as best as I can explain it. Of course, they're never going to have the same level of medical understanding that I do, so that hopefully they don't quite feel as lost in like how to proceed or how to move forward. There will always be some of that fear, right? Because you don't fully understand it, and it's, you know, depending on the situation, pretty hard to just be caught up to speed on everything there is OB-GYN, you know, and so there's a certain amount of trust that we hope, you know, people can continue to have in doctors, which I think is kind of an interesting thing to talk about these days. I mean, there's a lot of social media noise, and, you know, if you know, you listen to the right people, they'll say you shouldn't trust your doctor, you got to do your own research. And so my hope is that my patients do see me as an educator. They know I have their best interests in mind. I leave options on the table for, you know, where I think we, you know, can make different choices, or that I give them pretty confident, like, this is what we need to do in a situation where I don't feel that there's an option for their child's safety. And then, beyond that, it's unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, trust, you know, that you have a good rapport with the provider, which in that situation for you, Stephen, is tricky because it was somebody new who you were meeting during a, you know, high needs medical moment. But I guess that's where the trust has to sort of remain, that, you know, people are there in that role because they've trained hard to be there, and hopefully, you know, are going to have your best interest in mind, even if you just met.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree. Hopefully, in any industry that you have professionals, medical, engineering, like, you know, we have gone through that training, we've gone through the testing. It's continual. You know, it's not like you have stopped medical school and you don't learn anything else. You know, so having that trust that the person that you are putting your life into their hands essentially is knowledgeable enough in the subject and is there to take care of you. The same thing with engineering, like, you know, someone's not going to build a high-rise facility without having that engineering seal on there saying it has been through the proper procedures and calculations have been met, that this is a sturdy structure and you can physically go inside without it collapsing on you.
Yeah.
That's important.
I think some of the work...
just in... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. I think some of the life experiences that got us down the road of, like, you know, at least having more than a surface level knowledge of these things is the example of, like, contractors working on our house, and we hire them and trust them as a professional, but then we come back behind them every day and it's like, you probably should have done it this way, because I know a little bit about engineering and structural integrity and things like that, and I'm like, you could do this better, this carpentry is not very good, things like that. And it's like then your mind floats to your doctor and you're like, what if they didn't know some of these, or like they're treating my body like this guy treated my stairwells.
I think that's fair. I mean, you know, every doctor is not equivalent, right? You can still have a higher skilled or lower skilled physician, or someone who stays better up to medicine than others. So yeah, that part's tricky, and I think it's hard maybe for a patient to assess, like, that aspect of it, like how skilled is my physician. But, you know, there is a standard of care, there's a standard doctors are held to that I think, you know, we just, again, I guess, have to rely on that trust that at least they're doing that standard of care, like what any reasonable physician in that situation would do. You may have some who excel or go above and beyond, but it would be my hope that everyone would at least be practicing safe and evidence-based medicine.
Yeah, and I think to PJ's point, we've created in the society a really tighter group of doctors that your rate of failure is like much smaller than a contracting pool that has barely any training. All our doctors are signed off by a medical school of study and things like that, so there's a lot more vetting than giving a guy a hammer and a saw and saying go at it.
That's true. Yeah, there's medical school like you said, but then there's your residency board certifications. You have to recertify every number of years. Like, there's a lot of checks and balances on. We didn't just stamp this person's approval 20 years ago and aren't checking up on their skills. So there's a lot of oversight, but I still hear you. It makes sense. When you're in an unknown situation, you might question. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
In terms of the board certification, how does that work in the medical profession? Are you licensed only per individual states, and then you have to like reciprocity into other states, or how does that work?
Yeah, your medical license. I'm licensed to practice medicine in Michigan. It's separate. I'm board certified in pediatrics, meaning I have fulfilled the training and the testing required to be a pediatrician, and that applies to the whole entire country, but I would have to apply for a license in a different state if I wanted to practice outside of Michigan as a pediatrician.
Okay, so that's the same thing as engineering and, from my understanding, lawyers. So
is it just like a test or something, or what goes on there? You just sign a paper saying I
did it.
Uphold the values of Michigan residents or something?
The board exam is an 8-hour test that I hope to never have to do again. I did at the completion of my residency. And then there's a maintenance of certification, so like quarterly, 4 times a year, we have to do some questions at home. You have to do some continuing medical education, so some amount of hours of lecture every year, and maintain a license. So yeah, there's ongoing work towards it every year.
No, that's cool to learn. That is almost identical to being a professional engineer. That's fascinating to hear about.
Cool.
Which you get to label yourself that. I don't. I'm not. I'm just.
No, it is yet. Every state, you have to become licensed in that individual state, or you can't practice engineering within it. And same thing, each state has different requirements of terms of how many PDHs or continuing education credits you have to obtain in order to reapply for licensure every year or every other year, depending upon which state you are in.
Hence why I never went after a PE.
Steven's like, I'm done learning, guys. This is the end.
Oh, I just get master's degrees and things.
Oh, that's
I learn on the job, man. It's fine.
Well, for all of our listeners, I like to speak about the adult beverage that I am currently consuming. Right now, I am drinking a Sapporo. It's a beer that's actually out of Japan, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Yes, very good, light beer, but still delicious in taste.
I'm
Steven,
having a nice Sam Adams Old Fuzzy Wig. So a fall beer in the summer, but it's not too bad.
Oh, I was just saying, I prepared for this moment. I brought a beer. It's actually my husband, Kevin, and my brother-in-law's homebrew.
No way.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Shout out to Kevin and his brother.
I'm going to have to load the kids in the car and come up for a visit if you guys are brewing beer now.
They've done it a couple times, and I'll say this is the first one I would have brought on the show. It's very good, though.
Oh, good.
Does it have do you know what style it is?
Yeah, it's a juicy IPA, hazy IPA. It's really good. Good summer beer.
That's
Perfect
fantastic.
for summer, yeah. We may have a pediatrician on the show, but she's not taking care of people over 21, so it's fine. None of her patients should be drinking.
Right.
That's a whole new ball game, yeah. What's that, PJ?
Nah, so you were on 2 different pages here. I was going to say, you mentioned about having to go into the hospital and meeting new parents, getting to check on the infants before they transition into your practice. So are you the only person, or there's like a rotation of licensed pediatricians that go into the hospital? And like, how does that work? Because for us, the pediatrician that came in ended up being the one that we ended up using after leaving the hospital. But it almost sounds like you're being able to use that as like a marketing technique, like come to my practice.
Yeah, I mean, well, so how it works is I'm in a group practice, so we're going through some changes, retirements and new hires, so I think the final number is there's going to be 6 of us. And on any given day, one of us is assigned to make rounds at the hospital. And the babies we round on are families who decided that they want to come to ABC Pediatrics. That's the name of our practice. So they either have an older child who already comes and sees us, or it's their first child and they've, for whatever reason, friends recommended or decided to come there. So those are the babies we go see. And then, it might not always be exactly my patient. I will see them, it just kind of depends on the schedule of whoever's rounding and then whoever they choose to see at the clinic for their newborn appointment. But it would be our group either way.
Nice.
So
All right.
we love doing that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think when we had our kid in the hospital, there was an in-house pediatrician that checked them the first day, but then we were expected to take it to the regular pediatrician, I think 2 days later or whatever, after birth, 2 days after birth, something like that, whenever you got kicked out of the hospital.
Yeah, they're moving probably more practice. Most pediatricians are moving towards that kind of practice of only being clinic or only hospital. Just the, you can imagine like workflow, work-life balance aspect of having to get to the hospital, get to clinic. You're getting calls from the hospital if the baby has any issues from clinic, which if there's pediatricians in-house, sometimes that's easier for them to just be sort of managing the babies, but we still find it valuable for our practice. Our families really appreciate seeing us, especially if it's a second child and they already know us, and we just, love that we can, because the hospital pediatricians might not know we're open on Saturday and can fit that newborn in, or, just they don't know our practice as well, so we still find it's valuable, but there's less and less of it, I think, these days.
Right.
That's cool, though. I kind of like that. No, I couldn't imagine having a job where you're on call at a scheduled time and not knowing when your day is going to be interrupted.
Yeah, that is a little odd to me, but I get it. Like, that's just the industry. I also can't imagine the working shifts that, pediatricians, doctors, nurses, they have to put in. Like, I respect the hell out of them. I know my brother-in-law is a nurse in the pediatric ER, and not only mentioning the poor children you have to see day in and day out that have, life-threatening injuries or illnesses, but 12-hour shifts, 4 days in a row, that's wild to me.
Right. Yeah, fortunately, residency was rough in terms of that kind of scheduling, but after that it gets better. Talking about the hours in general in residency, it can be pretty demanding. That's there's a maximum work requirement. I use quotes because sometimes you go over them. That was 80 hours a week and no more than 30 hours straight that you can be working. It'd be 24 hours of patient care and then 6 hours for wrap up. You could do that up to every 4 days. So that was rough. Now clinic is a lot better. So, it's kind of we call it like, in the trenches of training, because you're really just working really hard to just get that breadth of clinical experience that you need to then be able to be prepared in the future for anything that might come up. But the outpatient life is a lot better. I work Monday through Friday. I get 1 day off a week. So I work 4 full days. 1 in 6 weekends is a call weekend, so that just means I'll do a Saturday sick clinic, anybody who needs to be seen on Saturday, and then we take phone calls, so on non-business hours, our families can call the clinic any day, night, holiday, weekend. We always ask them, reserve it for, do I take my kid to the ER right now or not?
Yeah.
Not just like, just want to chat, and they're very respectful of that, and I think it's a great service to have for them. So it's a lot better in terms of hours and shifts now.
Yeah.
I have a lot more quality of life.
That's good. That was kind of going to be one of my questions, but we have a pediatrician practice that's kind of like that, but I don't think they take calls and stuff on the weekends. You leave a message chat with a nurse practitioner, and then the nurse practitioner says we need to get a doctor involved or not. So that's still pretty nice because you have a line to someone 24 hours, which is great. Mulling around some of the topics you and I were texting about before this, I think one that popped out from an earlier episode was the technology for kids. So we talked about that early on in the podcast, I think last year, and I mentioned probably that my philosophy in our household was, no screens until they're 1, and then like try to capture the magic of us millennials of like slow introduction to different technological things as they progress. Is that something you recommend to patients and parents and things like that, or do you take a different approach?
Yeah, no, actually, I loved listening to you guys' take on it, just because I think in my sphere of, pediatrics and healthcare, there's a big negative messaging around screens, which I think is warranted. There's a fear that kids will spend too much time on it and not use their imaginations, creative play, physical movement, exercise, all of those important things too. But I think also there's no getting away from the world we live in, and like needing to have a certain amount of skills is also valuable. So I appreciate that from your engineering mind. But I think it's all about quantity, quality of what they're doing, being nuanced about that, and like still prioritizing like connection between the family members. And because my fear is young children often are using it too much, and sort of it's a common calm down technique from parents. I see that as a big trap of like, they don't want to sit at the dinner table at the restaurant, so we'll just plop the iPad in front of them for a long period of time, or just they're kind of, I guess it, in a sense, I think of it as almost like crippling their skills of like how to be bored, how to entertain yourself, how to be creative, because we didn't we didn't have that in our day. I guess I can say that now. So I just think there's some amount of opportunity you might be giving up to just let the kids be creative, and really as then they get older also find ways to move their bodies and be outside. And so there's just a balance. I think it's all about the balance. And then as they get older, it's also that social media aspect, which you guys talked about, I think, a bit, of just, trying to help them navigate. Their minds are still so, they're developing. I think they say the frontal cortex, your brain, is fully developed at the age of like 25.
Yeah.
So they still don't have all these, just communication skills and self-confidence, and so just so much that I think could be crippled by some of those technologies. So I think it's introducing, but slowly and maybe cautiously, of which kind of technology and when. And that might look different for different families, but I think the intentionality behind it is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, PJ's got the unique perspective that he's got kids on two ends of the spectrum, with going into end of high school and going into kindergarten. So he's wrestled with all sorts of things. Yeah.
Yep. And I don't know if you have spoken in depth to the teachers of where Annicelli will be going, but I know at least for our middle child, who is in high school now, they don't have books. Purely everything is on the computer. I don't know how they are going to be doing kindergarten. Do they still have physical books, or is everything going to be electronic media?
Yeah, I know for we have our teacher meetings this week, but I know for the pre-K classroom, they only had since they're starting, that's the age they're starting to phase out nap time. They would have like rewards during nap time if they stayed awake, that they could have iPad time or whatever. Our school, they encourage like low tech, grow into it sort of thing. So from what I'm aware, in our first tour, which sold us on the school, is that they have one STEM teacher that comes into the classroom at a certain time of day in all the grades and teaches them about STEM stuff, including screen time and stuff like that. Each kid gets a tablet in the class, but it's like reserved for a separate section of the day and things like that. And it's like used as more of a reward mechanism. And all of them are like educational games and things like that. And then they also have, the other cool thing is that the one TV in the room is a smart TV. So it has like, it can be drawn on and it can play educational games and videos and interactive dancing and things like that to get them up and moving. So they loved that when we came in, and they showed us some of their dance things. They had it on the TV and they danced with the TV to show us their skills.
It's interesting to me to see how technology has transitioned schools to be like that tool to help someone grow up into like be a successful adult, such that at the high school level now, they're not even writing. You only use a computer. You don't have to show your work in your mathematics courses because you're just typing in the answer. You don't have to write an essay by hand. You're typing it because they don't use paper anymore.
So teachers don't even give extra credit anymore, or partial credit for sort of getting the
Oh,
answer?
I'm not sure. Probably
That's
not
wild.
not at the grade school level,
Yeah.
I can imagine.
Huh.
Unless they did it like our old physics courses.
Yeah. So that's wild.
Wow.
But as far as in a pediatric practice, is
Mhm.
it like a noticeable change, the kids that are like have the TV or the iPad as a babysitter versus the parents that like only use it as a last resort sort of thing?
I think so, at least at the extremes. The parents who maybe, aren't conscious of this and maybe, and that might happen for a number of reasons. I don't know, single parents, you have limited resources,
Yeah.
whatever it is. Like, I don't want to villainize that sometimes parents do,
Oh, yeah.
need to use it as a tool. But yeah, those children who have like pretty significant access versus very limited, you can tell in their like emotional coping ability. It's kind of like,
Interesting.
0 to 100. There's really like, and some of that's developmental, as kids get older, some of those skills come either way. But I think the screen use in that age, so I'm thinking like, maybe 1.5 to 4 years old, like that age where,
Okay.
you might call them tantrums. I call them big feelings. You just, depending on how you respond to those, or potentially shut them down quickly, or maybe not allowing the child a little bit of an opportunity to, you just got to get the big feelings out. Your parent's here, and it's hard because as a parent, it's a little dysregulating too, isn't
Yeah.
it? Like,
Yeah.
oh wow, they're screaming. We're in a restaurant. Like, what are we gonna do here? But I think that's where the hard work of parenting kind of is, and sometimes it's like, okay, here's the screen, like let's just shut it down, and that's fine too. Yeah, I'm not gonna pretend that's never happened in our house either, but yeah, I think you can tell a bit of that. And then in the older ages, I see it more. I think the teens don't always have the insight into it, but those who are just very heavily, I mean, I don't want to sound so negative about it, but truly addicted to their phones and their social media, and it comes out in their mental health in a big way. They're very anxious and they don't know why. And it's that, kind of just constant need to be, feeding their brain with this content, where they'll tell you, I feel better when I'm on TikTok or Instagram. Like, maybe you do, but it's that like tether.
Yeah.
That I definitely I see it at that end of the spectrum too. So it's tough. We're all navigating it, for the first time together. I feel like pediatricians, parents, all of us, the kids.
Yep.
So it's not like there's a roadmap.
Yeah.
But you can definitely see where, and I'm sure it's dependent on the specific child, right? One might not have as much trouble with it as another, but. Have you guys heard of the book The Anxious Generation? Have you read it or
No.
heard about this one?
No,
Okay.
but it's got a good
It's kind
title.
of about it's kind of about this concept of just, and I'll say it's very heavy. I feel like he kind of uses a lot of evidence and examples to kind of paint the picture of why this mental health crisis we see with kids over the last 10-15 years has come right around the same time as like the technology boom, and just the ways that those things might be not just correlated but potentially the cause of. So yeah, it's an interesting read. It's a tough one, I feel like, as a parent, because you're not going to shield your child from all of this. But yeah, how can we just think about it thoughtfully and talk about it with our kids, even not just never give them access to it. I don't think that's reasonable.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's interesting you mentioned about mental health, because I don't remember where I saw the statistic, so unfortunately I can't fact check this at the moment. But they said the second leading cause of death for children between the ages of 8 and 12 is now self-termination, and that's just really sad to hear.
Yeah, I don't know the statistics on it, but it's certainly more common than it should be, and it's definitely up there in the top few causes of death for teenagers. And yeah, I mean, we're definitely seeing just and I can't compare obviously my practice now to 10-15 years ago because I'm 5 years into practice, but from what my colleagues share, they're definitely feeling like this last 5 to 10 years has been so heavy. I mean, you think of COVID and the impacts that time period had on kids, all of us. So I'm sure that's a huge part of it, but they kind of felt like maybe it was coming even before that, and what kind of factors could have played into that as well. And I think there's good news in all of it too. There's like ways we can look at it and help our kids be aware of it and be mentally resilient. But I think the first step is just awareness of what are the risk factors.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, if there's a problem, you start to learn how to avoid it and find a solution. So there's still time to course correct and things like that. But I definitely did not want to start off that topic thinking, making people feel like they were going to be shamed for putting their kids in front of a screen, because obviously
Yeah.
I do it sometimes too to
Right. I mean,
get
we
a,
all do. I think
yeah.
it's all about just that the right time and place and frequency, and also working on those skills other times too. So yeah, I mean, screens are a great tool and their kids love them, so we shouldn't say they should never use them.
Yeah.
But yeah, just time and a place, I think.
I'm still trying to convince Shannon that it's cool down here and she should come visit. So.
Girl, it is not cool. It's 99 degrees outside right now.
Yeah, before you got here, he said, "How's your summer weekend?" I said, "We are not well in Michigan. It's 90 degrees today. We're not used to that up here. We're suffering."
Next week is supposed to be the hottest week that we're going to have in 2025 is what they're telling
Oh,
us.
wow.
So,
Yeah, I saw 99 on the schedule.
Yeah.
Is it humid? Like, does it
Oh,
feel
It's-
yeah,
humid?
it is extremely humid
It's,
down.
it's rarely less than 70% humidity down
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, so you're out swimming in the heat, basically. It's crazy.
Gross.
It's not like going out to Arizona where it's like hot and at least your
Right.
sweat is doing some work.
That was really interesting to me, too. So I went out there, and we were in Las Vegas. It was like 112 degrees. And I don't think it registered to me how much humidity really does make an effect. Because I was like, gosh, guys, it's really not as hot out here as I thought. No, like temperature-wise it is, but without that humidity, you just don't notice it.
Right. Yep. So something that we noted in our text chain before this was, balancing the life as a parent and a doctor. What's that entail for you? And I think, isn't your husband also practice medicine, right? So that's
Yeah.
double the
Yeah.
burden. Us engineers, that like sometimes we get overtime, but it's none of the on-call stuff.
I'm not even
usually.
sure if I work.
Compared to a doctor, at least.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, Kevin is an ophthalmologist, so he's an eye surgeon. He is a specialist in something called glaucoma. So this is something I even hardly understand. We don't spend a lot of time in medical school talking about eyeballs, actually. um, so that's what he does. And yeah, so he fortunately, ophthalmology is a great work-life balance field out of all the medical specialties, I would say, in that he works clinic hours, he operates during business hours, and at the practice he's at, he has pretty minimal call, which is great for us being a two-physician household. And then mine I kind of described before, but just mostly clinic-based hours, 1 in 6 weekends, but it's mostly phone call, a little bit of like obligations on Saturdays. So I mean, it certainly does take away, in a sense, from family time at times. So yeah, it's hard. I would say it affects the family just in, we gotta, Eli will be like, "Can I have a stay-home day today?" And I'm like, "I have 25 patients, I can't just rework the schedule like someone might be able to take a meeting from home." And so there's definitely a little bit less flexibility in parenting with the fields we have, or, he gets sick and has a fever. That was a challenge kind of early on during the early daycare days when he would get sick, and we didn't have family around and we both had a lot of patients to see. Of course we can cancel patients, but it's something we really try not to do.
Yeah.
Because that's 20 to 30 families who are planning to come in and have a checkup or a sick visit. So
Yeah.
so in those senses, it's a lot of stress or pressure of just the obligations we have to others outside the home. And then I would say the one other thing is like the mental, like sometimes I'm not mentally fully present with my family. I have to work really hard on that because I carry a lot of the stories and the illnesses that I've seen with kids, and I'm just worried about them or thinking about them, and I have to really try to very consciously unplug from that at times. So that's challenging, but it's also, like I mentioned at the beginning, is just like that's why I do what I do. I love that I can have those relationships and be there in those like difficult times for families, but it just means there's a lot I'm carrying at once. So yeah, it definitely just means we try to plan when it's a weekend, a stay home day, as Eli likes to call it. We try to be very intentional about screens are we put our phones away. We are trying our best to just be as present and there to play and hang out with Eli as much as we can. But yeah, it is a challenge for sure.
I bet. So do you have any like advice for people that might be listening on how you get into that? Like if you notice yourself getting into that zone of like I'm here with my kid, but I'm not here with my kid. How do you pull yourself out of that usually?
Yeah, I would say teamwork. Kevin is good. He notices. He's like, oh, like maybe, I'll spend some time with Eli if you need to get something done and, take turns. So it's like the partnership. And then for me, it's also, it comes back to screens a lot because on my phone, of course, like everything these days, I have access to the electronic medical system. I might be checking for labs on a patient where like, I don't need to know them tonight, but I'm worried about them tonight. So I'm gonna look, or I'm gonna check on them in the hospital because I can and I'm concerned about them. And so it's really just creating some physical distance between myself and my devices that allow me to do that, so that I can, just disconnect, be present with my family. But I guess, yeah, kind of just awareness is the first step, right? Like when you're thinking about it, like why am I thinking about it and how can I unplug in a sense?
No, I appreciate you bringing that up, and I'm sorry that sometimes you do have to like really focus on making that determination. And the one thing that I have always told myself, I have never given my phone number to my employer. I do not have a Teams chat on my phone. I don't have email on my phone because once I am out of the job, I am unplugged. Like, do not contact me. Now, that's a lot different than an on-call doctor or someone who has, like you said, the 24/7 access if you need someone to come. Yeah, but at least in my profession, truly unplugging so I don't have to worry about it until I physically go back in has really helped me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I struggle with that as a manager now because I don't have the ability to, if an employee has a problem and they can't come to work the next day or like.
So are you
something that
required
has
to have like access to the company's systems on your personal device?
They don't require it. Otherwise, I'd have a company phone. Maybe if I moved higher up in management, but obviously it's appreciated by my employees that they have access to me when they need it, sort of thing. And so, but luckily I can just say, hey, this one seems important. Give me a moment. I'm going to respond to this person, or it can wait until tonight or something when I'm by myself.
Right.
It's not a child is like
bleeding
from the nose and they need some advice, sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, at least it is hard at Eli's age. He's 4. We try to explain, okay, like mom's going to take a call. It's important. Kevin will try to distract because, that's the nature of the calls are usually we'll call you back within 15 minutes. It's usually like, are we going to the ER? Are we staying home? I mean, sometimes less acute. But then I'll have Eli, mom, in the background while I'm trying to be like, okay, so, is your child breathing? So, I mean, usually it's not that serious. That's kind of dramatic. But just, the seriousness of my phone call with the, typical toddler behavior in the background. At least they understand, their parents too, but it can be difficult to navigate.
Yeah, I'm sure at least in your practice you get a lot of grace because your patient's caretaker is going through the same thing, whereas maybe a family practitioner of a 30-year-old's probably going to get real upset.
Right.
Well, on the fun side of things, I do remember going to my pediatric doctors, and they had plenty of toys and entertainment, puzzles and stuff in the lobby. Did your practice have something like that, and were you able to get to choose what was in there?
We do. I mean, it kind of went through some evolutions, with COVID and like, can we have toys that all the different kids touch? Like, should we be doing that? So we have mostly books. All the kids get stickers on their way out. There's suckers.
Nice.
The classic pediatrician thing. We say, don't eat any sugar, and then here's your sucker. Usually just if they're sick, or like you earned it. But yeah, we have all the fun things. I started with this practice just a couple of years ago, so I wasn't too influential in the fun choices. But hopefully in the future, when they need to revamp, I'll get to do those cool things.
Nice.
Yeah, that just puts into my mind, reminding me of that episode of Friends where Ross continued to go to his pediatrician and like someone walked in and like saw him and they were giving him a sucker or whatever, and he's like a grown man.
Yeah.
That was super funny. Other thing we had noted in our bullet points was social and physical development, coming of the ages, like I don't know, PJ, if you have it when you take Luna or the other kids to their pediatrician, we have to fill out, developmental points and survey of, the kid can do this or the kid can't do that, or she's okay at this or she's like pretty good at that. I don't know, like
Now
I don't know where I'm leaning with this. I got a little distracted in the weeds, but like
I was
bringing it
shaking
up
my
as
head because every time that we go, and it's mostly my wife taking Luna, but every time we go, the pediatricians are like, oh, she's well on track, and if not more advanced than where she needs to be developmentally,
Nice.
at least mentally and mature-wise and all that kind of stuff. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, she's real petite. And so I think last time she went,
Aw.
they said she was less than 10 percentile on
Oh,
her
wow.
height and
No
like
way.
less than like 5 percentile on her weight. She's just real small, but
Yeah.
mentally, yeah, above and
Killing
beyond.
Nice.
That's good.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's so. Yeah, we were talking about just social, physical development in general is like that's pretty much the core of what we're doing as pediatricians. Is obviously going from that little baby who comes in our clinic to the 18-year-old who walks out the door. There's just so many changes that happen, most notably in the first 2 years, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Just the crazy development in the first year, and then even in the second, still quite rapid. And yeah, physical too, right? Are they growing? Are they on track? Is that, a medical problem? Is it, feeding problem? And to your point, PJ, you can't tell from this phone call here, but I am 5'1", so I can always relate to my small patients and tell them, don't worry, someone has to be the 5th percentile. It's normal as long as you stay on the 5th percentile. It's all good. Or I'll have my, 6'1", 14-year-old boy who's upset because he's not 6'3" yet, and I'm like, you're okay.
I'm looking up at you as I'm diagnosing you.
Yeah, exactly. So I get to joke with them a little bit, but yeah, I mean that's that's really the core of pediatrics is just making sure there's such a variation of normal, but that for that individual's body and development that they're on track and there's no major red flags. And just walking the parents through what to expect because you may have had one child and it went one way, you have a second child, it goes a different way. So there's always even an experienced parent has a new experience with each child that we can walk them through and reassure them, that just because this child's smaller or faster at talking or this or that doesn't mean there was something wrong with either of them. They're just different.
So I know with our relationship with our pediatrician, I don't know if you do this, if all of them do this for patients, because obviously PJ and I are sitting here as like one experience, right? But they will, if those developmental tests or whatever are off at all, will get recommended to like a speech therapist or a physical therapist or something to get them back on track. Is that like kind of across the board what everybody does, or is that like going above and beyond? Because like we're talking like if it's off by like a couple months, we'll like catch them up as soon as possible, sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it varies on the situation, but certainly as a whole, pediatricians are all about early intervention, which means if you're noticing anything just like a little bit behind for age, we're all about just kind of helping them get to age appropriate development quickly. Because firstly, most states have a free early intervention program that is like child developmental specialists who often come to your home, and it's free of cost to all families regardless of insurance. It's doesn't
Nice.
even matter what kind of insurance you carry. So we'll often recommend that, and it depends on the situation. If they're like you're saying, just like, well, at 9 months they should be pulling up to stand, but they're not quite doing it, and then they do it at 10 months. Yeah, of course I'm not so worried, but that's another one of those like joint decision making moments with the family is they would qualify for this if you guys would like to, pursue it and give that extra support. We're all about it. If you'd rather wait and you're not as worried and you want to monitor, we're okay with that too. Unless, of course, it's starting to get drastically outside of normal for age, then we might be a little bit more encouraging of intervention. And there's different levels of intervention. Those early intervention programs through the state are pretty minimal intervention. They're free. They come once or twice a month, whereas if a child's maybe more significantly behind in some type of development, we may recommend a more professional, you should go once a week, spend 30 minutes to an hour with a speech pathologist or with a physical therapist for dedicated one-on-one, like expertise with that type of specialist if they're really needing it. So yeah, it just kind of depends, and it of course depends on the family's desires too.
Okay, that makes sense. I got another one to field for you. So this one's more on the medical landscape as a whole. Like you said, you'll see like 25 families in a day, how do you maintain like an actual relationship with them to where you can build that trust and get to know the person, and it doesn't just like fly out of your head as soon as they leave the room, sort of thing?
Right. Yeah, I think that's important. Well, you guys might like this technology in the healthcare space, but I'm just pegging you as guys who love technology. I recently actually been able to use an AI scribe. So this is a way that I am using ambient, AI scribing in the room. For me, I feel like it allows me to do more of what you're saying, of like really connecting with the family. I'm no longer, most of the time, sitting behind a computer trying to capture every detail of what they're saying, because that's important too, right? I want their medical documentation to reflect our conversation. I want to capture details. I want to be able to follow up on them next time I see them. So I do need to record it. But I also really dislike sitting behind a computer and not being able to have eye contact with my, family, the patient, the parent. And so I feel that usually something has to give. Am I going to let the family's experience give? And I'm not going to make eye contact with them so I can finish my documentation, or am I going to let the eye contact give so I can get it all done so I go home to my family, at the end of the day earlier. So it's that kind of balance. And so recently I have found that by using that, I really have been able to connect better with my families. And, beyond that, I think it's just showing you care, relating personally to them, trying not to make, as much as possible, make them feel rushed out the door. We are on a time clock, right? I have 15 minutes to talk about your child's sleep, eating, like development, any concerns you might have. Like, it is, of course, limited, but just making sure they feel heard and important, and doing your best to remember important details about them next time you see them. And, hopefully that shows through.
Yeah.
It is hard.
I appreciate you mentioning that, and I'm glad to hear that the AI script writing has helped that process, because I do remember one of the things when I was younger is, the pediatrician would be in the room for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, but the whole time we were talking with them, they had to be sitting there typing on the computer, because they were basically typing they were at that point were the scribe and literally just copying down what was being said, freeing you up now to have more personal relationship with your patients. That's good. I haven't necessarily noticed that with medical doctors, but personally I have noticed that with my dentist, and because he's not sitting there having to type down what we're talking about. So I feel like he is very personal, and maybe that's just the type of doctor that he is, but I've noticed and have built a good rapport with him due to that aspect, like you're talking about, being able to converse back and forth on a more normal basis, and not having them sit there and be so focused on what they're working on at the moment.
That makes a lot of sense. I think frequency of getting sick helps the doctors, right? I think we,
unfortunately,
I think we sort of knew our pediatrician for a while.
Steven's got his on speed dial.
And then you have 3 kids, and you're in there all the time, and you're like on first name basis, and you start to get to know their family. Whereas my general practitioner, I see him once a year for my annual, and I'm like, I don't know you.
Yeah, unfortunately that's definitely true, because even there are families that, so at our practice we each have like our own patients that we see for all of their checkups, but it kind of depends when your child gets sick, what day, am I there, is my colleague going to see them, we have 2 locations, so I might not be at your preferred location that day. But I was just going to say that there's some families I know very well, but they're not my patients. It comes down to they're in a lot because their child is unfortunately, sicker than, or more frequently than other children, or they have multiple children, or however it is that, sometimes you get to know them just purely based on volume of encounters.
So there was a episode we did on the current media landscape and things like that, and we texted about mental health and all those things. Do you see, this may be outside the realm of pediatrics, but just like what's your take on like the media landscape? And you hinted at like how doctors are portrayed, and how there's a constant fight of should we trust the medical system and things like that. Is that invading your practice and whatnot? That's like kind of a big question, but and you can take it wherever you want.
Feel free to tell us how you feel about RFK Jr.
Oh no.
That is a big question, but it's a good one, and it's so relevant right now. You had brought up like medical advocacy, and I think in some sense, like media or social media, both, all of it, can be so helpful because it can be a place for you to learn and access more content and, just have the ability to expand your knowledge on certain medical topics. However, of course, it also can be full of misinformation, conspiracy, just fear mongering. And so, to some extent, that makes my job very difficult.
Oh, yeah.
Because where I might want to just have the opportunity to educate, I first have to address the disinformation you've already received and help you understand why maybe that's not, the evidence-based truth. And then try to educate from there, what I might think is more accurate or, better medical care. Obviously, you brought up our RFK. We don't have to get too political, but I would say that hugely comes into play, of course, with vaccines, and that's a huge part of what a pediatrician does. So that makes it difficult. And, I feel for people because truly in my field as a pediatrician, it's a bunch of parents who are just trying to do the right thing for their kid, and they're just trying to make the right choice that is going to keep their child safe, that's not going to cause them harm. And there's just a lot of voices out there that unfortunately confuse and, mislead them. And I feel for them. It's hard.
Yeah, it's tough being a parent, but I imagine it's tough being a parent and somebody who has to help other parents be parents.
It's an interesting time to do it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, you mentioned about the misinformation, and I know how hard that must be. Is you already go into a doctor's visit and you have these preconceived biases that you may learn. Some may be true and some not. But you as the professional have to help the parents navigate and sift through that information and be like, this is the evidence-based science that I have right here. This is probably not evidence-based. And then, helping them understand that your position is the one that they really need to follow along with.
Right. Yeah, it's tricky. It goes back to hoping that the relationship and the trust is there.
True.
That they know that I have their child's best interest at heart, and I tell them all the time what I would do for Eli, my child, and from there, it's even if we disagree, of course it's their child and their choice, and they should feel fully able to do whatever it is they think is best. But it can be difficult when that comes into contention with, well, you read that on Google, and I went through 7 to 10 years of medical training that, say different things. So, but you got to respect people and their different approaches, because they don't all maybe approach it from a scientific process even, and that's up to them, right?
Right.
So, it's tricky.
Yeah, I guess that does hark back to the medical advocacy question, because, you don't want the wrong information being the thing that people are forced to generalize, and you'd rather it be through maybe free courses at a medical school or something that's going to teach people
Sure.
Okay, you are a parent of 3 kids, so you should be knowledgeable on XYZ subjects. Okay, this person's a solo bachelor, he just needs to be able to call for help or something. I don't know. Be aware of whatever problems. I'm not a doctor, so obviously I don't know what those classes would look like. But
You're not a doctor?
Sure.
Yeah. What? The only doctorate I would get is a PhD. I don't think I have the time for an MD at the moment. But,
well, now I had a question. What it is?
It'll come back to you.
Oh, I lost it. I apologize.
All right. Well, while you're circling back on it, anything, since you're on here, Shannon, anything you want to bring up as a topic or have questions for us or why doors wide? Oh, PJ remembered now, so you'll have to sit on it.
We don't have to cut that part because it's probably going to be hilarious. But I know our generation, we saw the huge uptick in people being prescribed at the adolescence age of diagnoses for behavioral issues, ADD, ADHD. As a medical professional, is the trend still in that direction, or has that tended to drop off? Are we still seeing increased numbers of kids having these behavioral and I don't want to say mental issues because that sounds bad, but like, behavioral issues, or is that starting to not be as prevalent as it was when our generation was younger?
Yeah, I think it shifts some. So ADHD is still definitely a real diagnosis. It's a imbalance of certain neurotransmitters in your brain to allow that person to have difficulty, or it causes that person to have difficulty focusing, and that is a real thing. But I think what we've found over time is a lot of kids maybe were also getting diagnosed with that, who maybe more were very anxious that they couldn't focus because they were so worried, or they were going through some kind of childhood traumas, some difficulties in their childhood, or depression, what have you, that have led to them looking like a child who just can't focus because they're overwhelmed, in their mental health state with some other difficulty. So we've kind of maybe come to understand the spectrum of what maybe otherwise was just ADHD for a lot of kids. So those all exist, and they're kind of interconnected, and I would say more so in the last 5 to 10 years, we've just seen a lot more anxiety and depression in kids than I think we used to.
Okay.
So, I mean, definitely also more ADHD. I think TikTok helps a lot of people feel that maybe they have ADHD that was unrecognized for 30 years, and now they need a diagnosis. Social media is funny in that way. But yeah, I mean, we still see that for sure, but I think maybe more now recognized anxiety and depression that maybe was there to some degree before. Maybe it's coming out more because of different factors in our more modern life than before. But there's certainly still a big portion of pediatrics that is mental health and helping kids navigate that.
And is that something that you have to diagnose yourself, or do you basically see the signs and then send them to specialists to have like official diagnoses for that?
Variable. I mean, I'm somebody who likes a very comprehensive evaluation. So if it's ADHD specifically, because as I mentioned, it can kind of masquerade as some different things, I really love a child to have what's called a neurocognitive assessment. So it's with a psychologist who really sits down with them for a matter of hours over maybe more than one day to understand their brain function to the best of their ability, which I don't have the time or skills to do. So if it's anxiety and it's looking really clear cut, that's what it is, and it's common, I'm going to recommend a lot of lifestyle modifications and kind of diagnose that myself and sort of go ahead with treatment on something like that. So it kind of depends. But I certainly could make a diagnosis of ADHD without that type of evaluation. I just prefer the more wholesome approach where someone is able to kind of get down to the nitty gritty with a family more than I can.
That makes sense.
That's fascinating. Thank you. I don't know if it's that way for Stephen, but I know for me, I have very little knowledge of the medical field, so hearing from an actual professional is very enlightening to me. And I hope that that's the same way for all of our listeners, too.
Yeah, for sure. Much like anything's being a jack of all trades, master of none, I only dip my toes in that field and ask my brother-in-law a lot of questions. So he's one of those medical professionals that, I don't know about you, but he got into it because he's just got a curious mind, and he just doesn't shy away from me texting him the smallest thing to the biggest thing, because he's like, oh yeah, every problem's different, so let me dive in. I would hope that most people that go into that medical field kind of have that curiosity, right? Just like any other deep scientist that's trying to solve a problem.
Yeah, because every patient is a little different. They're not all exactly the same, so we have to be curious.
So now that PJ remembered that, we can cycle back to if you had anything for us before our time is up.
I don't think I really have a question. More is just praise or a comment on. I just think it's like amazing what you guys are doing. As a pediatrician, as you mentioned, a lot of times it's the moms bringing them in, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's great. Sometimes that's just the way our jobs line up. But I love that when dads bring in the kids. I love hearing a dad who cares like you guys do about being intentional and thoughtful about parenting, and just spending a lot of time thinking about it. Our influence over our kids over the number of years we have them is so important. And yeah, I just love seeing dads who are passionate about it. So mostly just a nod to you guys.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's kind of how our talks were born. Is I had so much in my head trying to get out, and I vetted some leading questions with different friends, and obviously PJ and I have known each other a long time, and we had good discussions over beer, so we figured we'd pull the trigger and get it started. And
Yeah,
start
and
trying
now
to be
the only
better
thing that's
parents.
changed is we have a microphone in front of our face.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And it was definitely born from the big topics, right? So we've covered just about every big topic except for religion so far.
Okay.
We've been saving that one for whenever PJ and I have 6 hours to sit down and
Yes.
really yell at each other a little bit. But we still got I'll probably point the camera towards the whiteboard, but we still have plenty of topics past
Oh,
that.
gosh. Cool.
And then hopefully in this,
That's awesome.
guest segment, we can. I've been in talks with a few other people I know. Hopefully, we'll
Great.
bring about a NASA scientist here in the coming days. And my mother-in-law's a nurse, so maybe we can get a nurse's perspective on the medical field, and also
Awesome.
grandparents. So that's one thing we haven't really delved into yet on the podcast, and definitely doesn't relate to pediatrics, but the psychology of a grandparent, because I can imagine what it'll be like when my kids have kids, but it's probably nothing like how I imagine.
Yeah.
No, but we really do
Yeah.
appreciate this. I know we'll be able to edit this, and we try and keep most of our podcasts less than an hour. So really, thank you again for coming on here. I know we have
Yeah,
enough
of course.
material that we'll be able to meet that. If this one may even go longer than an hour, considering how long we've all been talking.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was good
it's
topics,
great.
too.
No, I loved it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
thank you again, and we got to
Cool.
sign off this podcast somehow. So, listeners, appreciate it. If you enjoyed this, or even if you didn't, please feel free to comment on any of our social medias. If you did enjoy this, like and subscribe to continue to listen to us just talk about anything and everything related to the life of being a father and parenthood.
Yeah. Remember to be kind and carry on and see your pediatrician
That's right.
and general practitioner, PJ.
And thank you again to our guest speaker.
Oh, of course. Thanks, Shannon. We
Yeah,
really appreciate
awesome.
it.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Thanks for listening to Dad's Discuss.
Please like and subscribe wherever you are listening.
Also, comment any topics you would like us to discuss and share this with your friends and family.
Finally, if you would like to be on the podcast or discuss any topics, please reach out via our contact information below. This is the editing part that Steven was talking about, so we'll crop this part out. We'll find a good transition.
So residency week could work. Oh, do you have an issue?
Oh, he was just noting that it's going to kick
Oh.
us off at an hour, but
Oh,
we can
oops.
always
Okay.
do a different call as needed.
Oh, okay. Okay,
So.
good. Okay. But yeah, I was